Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm going to get started here. Today I want to just talk about metabolism and what that means. Our clinic is called the Metabolic Clinic of Idaho, metabolic. So there's some confusion as to what that actually means. And so just to well, let me tell you this. So what I want to talk about today is fuel flexibility and how our bodies are like hybrid cars. We can use carbs or we can use ketones for energy. Okay. And so ideally, we want to be metabolically flexible to where our body can use either one. Uh, and so, um, unfortunately, the standard American diet, or we call it the SAD diet, is very high carb, highly processed. So we kind of get accustomed to or addicted to reliant on carbohydrates for fuel rather than ketones, and we don't have a lot of variability in our food source and our fuel source. So that causes a lot of problems. So the goal of our programs as you go through the program is to help you become more metabolically flexible in which food source and what fuel sources you can function on. So when we talk about metabolism, simply define metabolism is how our cells turn food and oxygen into usable energy. Uh, Sometimes people say, "Oh, I have a slow metabolism," and or your metabolism will slow down, and that just basically means that your body, when when you have less food for an extended period of time, your metabolism, the cellular functions in your body slow down to not burn as much fuel. You kind of go into more of a uh, um, economic or very energy saving phase of function, right? So that your body can survive for as long as it can without any additional food. Uh, but here we're talking about how our cells take food and oxygen and turn that into energy. That's metabolism. And so, like I mentioned, there are two main fuel sources of metabolism: glucose and ketones. Glucose are from carbs, ketones are from fat. And so uh, let me see here, see if anybody's doing this or not. Hey, Sherry.
Hey Wiley, how are you?
Let me change my speakers here. I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes. Can
Okay.
you hear me?
Yep. Yep. Thanks for
So, Wiley, on that, would you repeat that glucose and what was the other one?
glucose and ketones.
Okay.
And so glucose from carbs, ketones are from fat. And like I said, ideally we want to be able to run on both of those if whenever we need to. We can switch back and forth like a hybrid car switches from gas to electric, right? Ketones are
Uh-huh.
ketones. Well, let's say carbs are going to be your quick, easy energy source. So if you have to run away or do something physically active quickly, then carbs are what you need. Uh, the problem with that is that high carb, constant glucose, your body is constantly fighting to keep that glucose under control because sugar in the blood is inflammatory and causes problems. The sugar sticks to everything, and that's how we measure your A1C is that it's how much what percentage of glucose is attached to the red blood cells. So our body really fights to manage those glucose levels. So chronically, if you have high glucose levels, your cells, because insulin is needed to help drive glucose into the cells. When you have high glucose in your blood, then you have high insulin, and your cells become desensitized to insulin, and that's why it's called insulin resistance. And what happens is when you have a bunch of sugar in your blood, your body will use whatever it needs, immediately, quickly. The rest of it gets stored into fat. So if you think about like our current modern lifestyle, is that we're eating high carb foods, sitting at a desk job all day, not really doing a lot of physical activity. We don't exercise, and then um, we just continue to shovel food in our mouths, right? And our blood sugars are staying high. We're not really fasting. We're not really skipping meals or anything like that. And so that's when you see weight gain, insulin resistance, all these things that lead to metabolic dysfunction. Okay. So, and that's where you see too, when
Mhm.
people eat a meal, then they get a little energy, but then an hour or so later, they just kind of crash energy wise because your body's using energy to put that sugar into fat. So your body, when you get tired, when you eat a high sugar meal, your blood sugar spikes, your insulin spikes, your blood sugar starts to come down as your body's moving that sugar into cells or converting it into triglycerides to store it as fat. And that's where you get tired after a meal, is when you have insulin resistance. So uh, now when it comes to ketones, using fat ketones as our source of energy, this happens when we have low carbs in our blood, and our body will switch when it needs energy. It will switch over to using ketones, and that's where you hear the term ketosis. When you get into ketosis, you've used up all your carbohydrate stores, and now it has to start breaking down the fat cells to create energy. So when you get in that ketosis, you're actually starting to burn fat for energy instead of just whatever carbs you have. And so, like I said, ideally we want to be able to go back and forth. So there should be times when we use carbohydrates, and maybe we'll have some fruit or something like that before we have to do something physically or mentally challenging. Uh, but then there also should be times when we're using more of a low carb uh, meal plan, and we're eating mostly protein and fats, and allow our bodies to be able to switch back and forth so that we have better flexibility. That is the goal of overall to be healthy. Um,
Mhm.
so, like I said, with being metabolically flexible, you will have a more sustained level of blood sugar so that you're not having these big spikes up and down. And typically your energy will be
Mhm.
better. You'll have less food cravings because you're not just, oversaturating your body with these high carbohydrates, simple sugars, things like that. And then overall your inflammation is better, your hormone balance is better, because hormones are actually there's certain there's a couple different types of hormones. Um, one is the one we think of, like our sex hormones, is based off of a cholesterol base or backbone. So cholesterol and fat is important for certain hormone production and things like that. So it definitely helps with hormone support if you can be, metabolically flexible there. Um,
Mhm.
So the way to start to increase your metabolic flexibility is and Sherry, I think you had a experience with this. If you just go from whatever, maybe a high carb diet to a no carb diet, you'll feel pretty crappy for the first week or two because your body's trying to adjust, right? Um,
Yeah, it didn't it was almost almost 2 weeks and it wasn't adjusting. It threw my hormones off and so I find if I'm not carb heavy on my meals, but just a little bit of carbs helps
yeah,
so that I don't get that kind of wonky
yeah,
feeling.
yeah, exactly. So some people do, and again, there's a genetic component to that too, in terms of
Mhm.
how well or how much carbohydrates you need or don't need. Some people just feel so much better on a keto
Mhm.
diet, very low carb or no carb diet. And then other people
Mhm.
they need a little bit of carbohydrates in their diet to help support basic, functions like your hormones and your overall mood and energy levels. So
Getting out of bed,
yeah, yeah.
not hurting your husband.
Yep, exactly. So it's definitely good to kind of do it slowly, start to, kind of back off on the carbohydrates a little bit and see how you feel. And then if you notice like, man, I just cannot function without some carbohydrates, then add in the good kind, right? So that you're not just eating junk and crappy processed carbohydrates, so that you're healthy in terms of, so healthy carbohydrates are like fruit. There's vegetables obviously that have carbohydrates, and then if you're gonna have like bread or things like that, pasta, then make sure it's whole grain, as less refined as possible. So,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, I used to be real carb heavy on in my diet because we weren't wealthy growing up. So pasta was a big thing.
yeah,
I mean, you had a lot of spaghetti, a lot of macaroni, paydays, you got hamburger in there, the garden was in, you got some squash. So, to go from being real pasta heavy to no carbs was, you know, uh, I did throw my body off a lot, but to manage that. So instead of reaching for those carbs as a quick, easy, okay, I'll eat some nuts and some berries, or how about a hard-boiled egg? Or yeah, there's so many other things. It's amazing when
yeah.
you start to substitute those and really opens your world up a lot.
That's a good point you made too. When you do have carbohydrates like pasta or whatever, bread, or try to have some protein or fat with that, so lean protein or some good healthy fats can help kind of minimize the blood sugar spikes too. And
Hmm.
and try to have those things before you have the carbohydrates. So you eat the protein or the fat before the carbohydrates. And that again can just help minimize the blood sugar swings. And another thing you can do is like intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, where you're eating, in an 8 hour window. You're only eating during that 8 hour window, and then the rest of the time you're just drinking, water or unsweetened coffee, tea, something like that, to kind of keep yourself, so your body's using fat and carbohydrates as, you know, in appropriate amounts. So,
So Wiley, does like sleep time count for that part? So say you're gonna do um an 8 hours with no eating, so you can count sleep time in there, right?
it would be 16 hours of no eating and 8 hours of eating.
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So 16 hours
Okay.
would count,
Okay.
yeah, would be 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours of sleep, 7 to 8 hours being awake, and then an 8 hour window where you're eating or whatever. And that doesn't mean you're eating for 8 hours straight, right? That means,
What?
yeah. That just means you're eating your regular meals, with
Yeah.
maybe some snacks in there, but yeah. So that can help you become less dependent on food too. I think we just get so our life revolves around when we're going to eat next. We're always constantly kind of thinking about that. Oh, when are we going to have lunch? When are we going to have breakfast? What are we going to eat for this and that? And so
Yeah.
it's kind of it takes up a lot of our energy of just thinking about food. And so by
Mhm.
limiting your time when you do eat and then eating the healthier stuff, I think you're taking less of that, you're making food less of a priority in your life, right? And
Mhm.
changing those, making those healthier habits a priority. So,
Mhm.
yeah. So, so yeah, I think, yeah, just kind of summarize it, that it's important that if you've most of your life you've been mainly just on a high carbohydrate diet, then
Mhm.
take it slow, but start to make these little changes one step at a time, and just try, um, maybe reduce how much you're eating, or the time frame that you're eating, slowly, so that you start to get used to maybe feeling a little bit of a hunger, right? I mean, being hungry doesn't mean you're starving. Uh, it just means
Right.
you don't need to be full all the time, so it's okay to have that a little bit of that hunger, and then you can drink coffee or water or something to kind of help suppress that a little bit. And
Mhm.
but being okay, like we're not, most of us, I mean, there's food is readily available, you know what I mean? So we don't, it's not like an emergency if we're hungry, it's like, if I really
Yeah.
wanted to, I could go and find some food pretty easily, so
Mhm.
just kind of challenging yourself a little bit to change your habits that way, so that you can start to become more metabolically flexible. So,
Mhm.
um, and I think Jared could definitely answer these questions too, if we have, if you're like wanting to know maybe a deeper dive or have a bit more of a deeper conversation about this. And, um, go see Jared and chat with him about it. And, he's been, working with Dr. Willie for several years now, so he knows kind of
Mhm.
what we're doing here. And so he's a great resource to help you. So, but
Yeah, it
Sherry,
was interesting this morning. We went on a walk, not a huge walk, maybe 40 minutes, but I was gonna do a cardio challenge, a hit program for my workout. And I was thinking, okay, I need to eat this, this, and this before I start my workout. And James says, "Are you hungry?" And I said, "I'm really not." And he said, "Then you don't need to eat before you do things." But those old programs in your head tell you, that you've got to have that fuel. You got to have
yeah,
that fuel in you to do this stuff. So it was kind of interesting because it made me stop and pause and go, I'm really not. I'm
yeah,
really not. And the food tasted so much better after the
right,
workout. I was mindful of tasting the food, tasting the bites, and so it was more satisfactory instead of just eating it to get a workout in.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, if you are super lean, don't have much body fat, then you may need to do a little bit of eat something prior to your exercise. But most of us don't need to do that. We can go out and exercise, and then maybe after our workout, then have some food to help provide the healthy nutrients to build muscle, right? As your body's
Mhm,
in that building stage and repair stage, So yeah,
mhm.
that's a good point. If you're not hungry, we're just so programmed to eat, no matter what. Like, oh, this is just what I do, it becomes more of a habit than, and we're not as mindful about it. So I think that's a good reminder that James gave you there
But
that's good. It's good to have your partner to kind of you bounce things off each other and help each other that way. So
right. Yeah, if he's not trying to kill me.
no, no, he's not trying to starve you to death, huh?
Yeah, that's one man's opinion.
Yeah. Well, good. I appreciate you joining, and hopefully, yeah, it was a good conversation, and just keep thinking about that, and I think it's a good reminder for all of us, to just be like, okay, I need to be aware of my carbs and my and fats so that I can be more metabolically flexible and support the metabolic uh, processes in my cells. How our cells use energy, how it uses fuel and oxygen to do the job that each of our cells has to do to be healthy. So
Right on. I thought your explanation that, with the glucose and the ketones, that it's like a hybrid car. That's a great description of how it works because most people understand that visual.
yeah,
So,
yeah, gas is quick, burns easy, but it's not as efficient. So then,
mhm,
electric is way more efficient but there are times when you need the gas and there are times when you need the electric. So
mhm.
but, yeah, awesome. Anything else?
No, I've done good. Everything's going well.
Good. All right. Well, glad to hear it. Glad you're feeling good. So,
Yeah. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
all right. Well, I'll let you go if there's nothing else to talk about. So,
Hey, we'll
okay.
see you next week. Same time, same bat channel.
All right, Sherry. Thank you. You have a good day.
Yeah, have a good week.
All right. You too. Bye.